Chicago on New Year's Eve, honeymooned for 2 weeks in Jamaica.
Just to follow up a little bit on what you said, Larry, about winning. You show me a guy that's not committed to winning, if that's not the only thing he thinks about, I'll show you a guy that doesn't win much.
I think we saw that last night in the Budweiser shootout.
Yes, we did.
It's amazing, though, our first 3 cars, Darrell, they run within less than a tenth of each other. That's about what we saw yesterday.
Here is the key statistic on this tracker in blue, white on blue, and that is the differential between this car and the fastest car. 1/10 of a second. Kyle Busch, 183.59 miles per hour. Second fastest so far. Matt Kenseth rounds out of turn 4, and he may take the pole spot from Brad Keselowski right here in his Roush Fenway Ford, and does. Kenseth is the fastest so far, the 2009 Daytona 500 winner.
What's good about that lap, he backed up his practice lap from yesterday, and it is much, much warmer today than it was yesterday.
See what he's doing right here now. He cut the engine clean. It's some of the driver's responsibility. One of the things we used to do is we'd call this a coast down lap. So he's coasting down the back straightaway right now. One of the things he wants to do is sometimes not even stick my hand out the window to see where the air was hitting the race car. I would listen to see if the air was flapping on the side of the cars. So when I got back in the garage, I could tell the crew chief, look, we got a little aero thing going on here we need to work on. So it's just another little thing that a driver, a sharp driver, will do as he comes back to the pit road.
All right, let's go down to pit road. Matt Yoakum.
Mike, former national champion Bobby Labonte finished 10th in last night's Budweiser shootout. So the biggest lesson learned from that crazy race last night?
Yeah, well, we didn't participate in the January test. We did the tire test, and felt like we learned as much as we could there. And but last night was a little different for us because we weren't really for that. But obviously you just got to be hooked up with somebody, and we got hooked up with Tony at the end, but his radios were out, so he didn't want to really be up there in a mess without a radio. So I think we had a decent run after the first segment, and learned a lot for Sunday. If everything stays the same, we'll have our plan will be of what probably a little bit better than going into last night's race. So looking forward to it, and qualifying today was a little better than we practiced yesterday, so we'll take that and see where it ended up.
Should be a wild 500. To Dick Bergeron.
Kyle Busch last night had a good run until Mark Martin pushed a little too hard to the back bumper, took him out, crashed both cars. How can you communicate with the guy behind you in one of those 2-car deals that you want him off your back bumper?
I don't know. We'll have to get brake lights or something, turn them on, or flashers, or I don't know, throw up a road flare or something. But it was just a product of what we had last night. It'll be the same thing probably in the duels, and of course for the 500. But all in all, today's the qualifying day, and we knew we didn't have a shot for the pole with our M&M's Camry, but we're looking for top in class hopefully today with the Toyota guys. So unfortunately, we all just don't seem to have the speed we're looking for down here, but our stuff races really good, and it's really fast in the pack, and obviously we saw that last night with Michael Waltrip and I teaming up and hitting 206. So we feel good about the race and what happens here later on this week, but with what happened last night, we just have to all talk about it and figure out how to make a better way of communicating with each other somehow.
It was a wild night.
Thanks, Dick. Clint Boyer from Kansas is on track to take the pole away from Matt Kenseth. His first lap was almost 2/10 quicker than Kenseth's. Boyer won at Talladega last October, NASCAR's most recent restrictor plate race.
Jeff Hammond mentioned this at the top of the show. We anticipate that it will be a battle between Richard Childress Racing and Hendrick Motorsports for this pole here today. How about 48.59, getting close to one of the fastest speeds from yesterday's practice session.
Yeah, that's 185.2. Of course, I know you're probably saying, well, last night they were running 206, but that's with all the cars out there and a lot of drafting and pushing, working together. But that's a pretty good lap. That's about where I thought they'd be. Just quickly on Kyle Busch, talking about he and Mark Martin. I heard Mark say, I don't know what happened. I did the same thing I've been doing all night. What the difference was, Kyle entered the first turn higher on the racetrack than he had been all night, and Mark ran the same line. Mark got just a little too much over to the left side of the car, and I think that's what spun him out.
Mark Martin was the other half of that crash. He's on track for his qualifying lap, the defending pole winner of the 500. Here's Chris Devoda.
Thanks, Mike. With Joey Logano, and you had such high hopes for the Bud shootout, and then you were one of the ones caught up in the mess. Were you deflated last night going to sleep?
Yeah, it was. I wasn't very happy when I went to sleep, but you know, at least it was a shootout, not the 500. I went for points, but you know, we did learn a lot. There still was a lot of good things that came out of there. You know, we did get to make a pit stop there and kind of get used to new fuel cans and all that stuff. So there was a few pluses that came out of it, just not the way I wanted to end it for sure. I had a really fast Home Depot Toyota and felt like I had a good shot at winning it, and you know, just got to make it to the end first.
Hey, Mike, he could make up for it today by becoming the youngest ever pole sitter here at Daytona.
That would sure be a difference, but this is one of the fellas he's going to have to get past. Mark Martin has started on the front row of the Daytona 500 the last 2 years.
One of the things that always scares you as a driver, when you hop in this race car to go qualify, the first thing you're going to holler most of the time is, we don't have any oil pressure. And it's funny because they drop the oil pressure as low as they feasibly can to keep as much resistance and turbulence out of the engine as possible. It's just another one of those little tuning things, but it'll scare the heck out of you when you take off. You got 20 pounds of oil pressure.
First lap for Martin. It's a quick one, about 100 quicker than Clint Boyer, who presently has the pole.
But he was all the way up against the wall on that first lap, using as much real estate as possible to get that car wound up, and then on the second lap, the shortest distance, right against that yellow line.
And you could see his hands were not moving any. I mean, he's just basically leaning on the steering wheel, trying not to buff off any speed, because it's going to be within hundreds of it, if he beats Boyer.
Next Sunday, Mark Martin will start his 795th Sprint Cup race. It'll be his 27th Daytona 500. Can he score his third front row start in a row? Second to Boyer, 48.651. So by 6/100ths of a second, Mark Martin misses, snatching the pole from Clint Boyer. Matt?
And catching up with the Daytona 500 champion from a couple years ago. And yes, we are here to talk to you and to talk about last night's Budweiser shootout from the driver's perspective. What was the edgiest part?
Well, I guess the scariest part is when you're pushing someone you can't see, you know, and we're running 205 or whatever it is, and you can't see anything. So I mean, that guy drives into a wreck, you're going to shove him into the wreck, and if he, you know, so that's probably the kind of scariest part. And the frustrating part is you've always needed other cars to draft, but you could get behind cars and keep up to the pack and make some moves. Or here, if you didn't have somebody just absolutely shoving you, or if you weren't absolutely shoving someone, you know, you were done. And at the end there, I tried to get with Denny and couldn't get up to him, and ended up being an odd man out, and I got lapped in 15 laps, so it was pretty frustrating.
All right, thanks, Matty.
Yep.
But you know, in all honesty, it's no different than it's ever been down here. I mean, we haven't changed anything. Well, we have a spoiler versus a wing earlier last year, but still, you can't see through these cars no matter what, though. You couldn't see through the wing. You can't see through the spoiler. That's just all these things that I hear them talking about. It's not like it's brand new.
Tony Stewart on track. Last year, 2 victories, 7th in the standings. He told us the other day, this year, he is poised to come back and perhaps win his 3rd Sprint Cup championship. First time at Indy for the 500, he sat on the pole. First time at Daytona for this 500, he started from the front row.
Tell you what else he shared with us the other day. You know, he has some World of Outlaw teams, and last year he hired a young lady out of New York, Jessica Zimpkin, that drives one of his World of Outlaw teams. He said, as we started traveling around the country, we realized we somewhat enjoyed each other. Guess what? Jessica's now dating the car owner, Tony Stewart.
First lap for Stewart, 49.30. That's within the range of Clint Boyer and Mark Martin. Stewart time trialed 10th fastest here last February, and he's led more laps at Daytona than any active driver.
And he's one of the guys I was talking about last night, kind of look at Jimmy Johnson and kind of judge off what he does. Tony's lost a lot of weight. He's lost like 15 or 20 pounds. He's down to he looks really good coming into this season, physically, mentally, emotionally. I think he's well prepared to get a great start.
And we knew he would be a player as far as a top qualifier, because I think we've well documented in his 3rd year of being with Stewart-Haas that they get the Hendrick engines, they get the Hendrick technology, so not surprised to see him up there.
And there he went below the yellow line. Now that's perfectly legal when you're qualifying. Get down on that apron if you want to. Just don't do it on the last lap, well, any lap of a race.
third quickest for Tony Stewart, 48.67. That's